All right. Well, it's 7:05. We can get started. We always have some latecomers who join us. So welcome everybody to the Big Texas Read. We're here tonight to continue the discussion with Kendra Allen about her book, When You Learn the Alphabet, which I've got my handy dandy copy right here. So we'll talk about, finish our conversation about that tonight. We are just so lucky every time we get together that we've had support from lots of people around the state. And we've had people watching these recordings on YouTube, which is great. So it's always good to let them know, the people who watch later, that the University of Texas San Antonio Library System has helped us spread the word. So we're very thankful to them. We are thankful to the Twig Bookshop in San Antonio, where a lot of people have ordered their books. Up here in Dallas, we have partnered with Interabang Books. And both of these bookstores are part of the vibrant literary community in both of our cities, San Antonio and Dallas. So order from them online, maybe the way you do like Amazon. Lone Star Literary has also helped us spread the word. They've got a great website, Lone Star Literary, and they spread the word about all things bookish literary here in Texas. And this whole thing wouldn't have come together if it wasn't for one of our co-founders, David Samuel Levinson, who had the idea in the first place for a statewide virtual book club. And then we got together with Alexandra Vandekamp at Gemini Inc. down in San Antonio. And I'll hand it over to Alexandra, who can tell you a little bit about Gemini Inc.
I just wanted to say briefly, collaborations like this, I think, is what kept us going during this pandemic. And it's great that we've come up with an idea that's going to last beyond.
Can you guys hear Alexandra? For some reason, we can't hear you, Alexandra. Well, if you go to GeminiInc.org, you can learn all about Gemini Inc. Okay, she's gonna hop back in. Well, I'll take this opportunity to introduce our moderator this evening, Danielle Morvan. She is a writer with a background in toxicology and risk assessment. Danielle is a world traveler who has served in countries from Cambodia to Ethiopia. Her writing covers her cultural encounters, environmental concerns, and spiritual curiosities. And Danielle is currently working on her first memoir, and we're so thankful to have you here tonight, Danielle. Thank you for being our moderator with Kendra Allen, the author of the essay collection, When You Learn the Alphabet, which won the 2018 Iowa Prize for Literary Nonfiction from the University of Iowa Press. And Kendra was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. She holds an MFA from the University of Alabama. You can find other works from her in Brevity, December, The Rumpus, among others. And her poetry collection, the Collection Plate, is forthcoming from Echo, which is an imprint of HarperCollins. So we're so excited to have you both here. As we listen, if you have any questions that you want Danielle to bring up later in the discussion, just put those in the chat, and we will look forward to talking about those later. But for now, I'm going to hand it over to Danielle Morvan, our moderator tonight. Kendra, Danielle, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Blake. And thank you all the organizers for bringing us together. And Kendra, what a gift to get a chance to speak to you and talk to you about your book.
Same.
Such a beautiful piece of work.
Thank you.
And, I just remember when, I saw the cover of your book and the title of it, When You Learn the Alphabet, the first thing that came to mind for me was being in a Black Student Union program and having so many people in our group that hadn't passed English. And as a group, they kind of talked about, kind of English class being one of the most colonial classes that you can take. And I was just curious about how you came up with your piece, When You Learn the Alphabet, and why you decided to title your book that way.
Yeah, so the essay, When You Learn the Alphabet, that is probably the most natural essay that ever came out of me. It was the easiest because I had this idea. I remember it. I was leaving a poetry workshop and I wasn't paying attention in the poetry workshop because this idea clicked in my head of this game me and my daddy used to play when he would pick me up from Dallas and we would drive to Houston for the summer. Like I would go stay with him in the summers. And on this like ride to Houston to pass the time, we would play this game. It didn't have a name, but it would be like you go through the alphabet and you try to find things inside and outside of the car that begins with the letter. And so, like, for instance, A is, maybe you saw like an Acura driving. So that would be my A. A B would be something in the car. A C would be a car. A D would be, maybe I saw like a Dunkin' Donut sign, and that's my D. So we would do this to pass like the 3.5 hour drive to Houston. And by the time we finished, it would be like we had fun together. That was like a bonding thing. And by the end of it, we would be where we supposed to go. And if not, we would be in the area where we supposed to go. So it's like a what's the thing? A transportation vehicle, that game. A transportation vehicle to like me expanding like my language, me expanding, because I was young when we were doing this. So like me expanding language, me expanding like my position in language and how I speak and how I talk. And I just think of that memory of when I wanted to write this essay, I started thinking of A, B, C, D, E, and things that start with those letters, and how I can construct like multiple stories in one essay. And the alphabet was a way for me to do it, because it's literally like a game, and it's literally the way that I've learned to sort of make word associations, if that makes sense. So when I was writing that particular essay, I was thinking of that game in my mind, using the writing as a game. And I sat outside of my poetry workshop class, and I had another workshop in like 3 hours, a nonfiction workshop in like 3 hours. So I just sat outside the door of like that classroom for 3 hours and wrote a draft, went through A through Z, wrote a draft, and then I just kept like evolving it. And yeah, that was like the easiest thing I ever wrote, because I think it was something that I just knew. Like I didn't have to really think through it. I knew I wanted to talk about race. I knew I wanted to talk about gender. I knew I wanted to talk about my grandma. I knew I wanted to talk about my mama. I knew I wanted to talk about sports. And that was a way that I can talk about all of that and make it fit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's so interesting that you're talking about learning the alphabet, and you're also a writer, you know, so it's like you have this whole kind of layer of like, somehow you just have such a beautiful command of language and, you know, timing and all of that good stuff too.
Thank you. That's weird. That's another like weird thing too, because still today, it's hard for me to call myself a writer. I think like I've had a lot of people in my life speak that on me, and that makes me like receive it in a different way. Like I've had tennis coaches, I was playing sports, and tennis coaches would be like, hey, you're a writer, so you're gonna write this essay instead. Like forget the plan, we're gonna write essays to get into tennis competitions. So I would be doing that. It would be my mama wanted to write, and she would say, like I would just hear her like journaling or writing, and like she wanted to write. And then music was also a big thing. So I've had like people speak writing over me more than I've actually like woke up one day and was like, hey, this is something I want to pursue. I think it just kind of grew from like wanting to please them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you had some people kind of speaking that into your life, you know, and kind of seeing your writing as like a natural gift. And now you're a published author, so you like really are a writer.
And still I'm like, but am I?
Like the rest of us.
I am, please, I am. But yeah, that's something I still struggle with, like calling myself a writer, because I think like most of us have this idea of what a writer is, like a best-selling author or things like that. And it's really just like, no, you just write. Like that's what makes you a writer. So me unlearning a lot of that is still trying to like unlearn it. Even if like it's not something that I would end up doing for a living, even though that's like the goal, but if it's not, I would still be a writer if I didn't have that.
Right, even just for personal pleasure.
Yeah.
And were the essays that you selected for your book, were they mostly all written during your MFA program?
No, they were written in undergrad, like 90% of them. One of them was written in my MFA program.
Okay. And then how did you decide which essays to put into the book?
This gonna sound wild, but I put all my essays in the book because I was like, I need to make this a book. I talk about this a lot. Like I was just writing about the same thing those whole 4 years, and it just literally came together. I didn't really have to try to make a book out of it because I was already doing that with unconsciously. So I just put everything I ever wrote in those 4 years together. And of course, I took some things out. I had way more poetry, and I took that out because I was like, it's overkill now. I'm really learning that writing a book is literally erasing more than actually typing. Yeah. So I learned that with this book.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you say that what ended up happening where you kept writing about the same experiences over and over again and kind of like continuing to refine them. Why do you think that these topics or like those particular stories stood out so much to you?
Most of those stories were like moments in my life that I didn't think had an effect on me until I started writing about it. And I would like picture my mama, like she'll say things to me growing up, like, like this affects you, like you and your dad relationship, like this affects you emotionally and mentally. I'm like, girl, I don't care. Like it's not bothering me at the moment. When I'm 16, I'm like, why do you keep saying that? Like I want to go and like drive somewhere, and you keep bringing this up. And then also I went to undergrad during the time where Mike Brown got murdered, and all these protests were happening. I was in Chicago, which is literally one of the most segregated places in the world. It's so segregated. And I would see like how communities were attempting to come together, especially my school. I went to like a private art school, which I didn't know nothing about until I got there. And just learning how like what liberalism actually is, and how it's like not actually what people think it is, and learning about like nice white people who not really nice at all, but they think they nice. So I was just learning all this, and I was writing through it like my 4 years there, because I didn't know nobody in Chicago when I got there. And I wasn't writing when I got there. I had a different major. So when I found it, I was just finding myself writing about my dad a lot, because also me and my dad was like growing a relationship in my undergrad years. And I was like, it's a weird feeling because I'm used to it being like a strain there. And so I wanted to write through that strain. I'm always trying to find absolute truth, which doesn't exist. I'm learning that as well. Absolute truth is a myth. Most things are in a gray area. Nothing's really good. Nothing's really bad. That's really hard for the kind of person that I am, because I need closure.
Well, but you also are like the queen of half truths, so maybe there's something there for you.
Yes, it is, and I had to like accept that about myself. A lot of self-acceptance. Yeah, I just, like Drake said, like not having closure takes a lot out of me, and I'm a person that not having closure takes a lot. So I didn't have that closure with my dad, from like having an iffy relationship to like a consistent relationship, and I was trying to bridge that gap. So that's where those essays were coming from, of me like actually confronting the years before that, and then also like living in the present of like the Mike Browns and things like that. Yeah, that was a long answer. I'm sorry.
No, that was beautiful, because it's so nice to hear about like your writing, like bringing healing to your family situation too. Because I was kind of curious, you are really forthcoming about, your parents' journey and their experience. And I was curious of how they might have been receiving, your work.
Okay. Absolute truth time. Going back there. My mama, like me and my mama talk all the time. So like everything in the book, nothing would ever surprise her if I wrote it about her, because I say the same things all the time. I'm very repetitive that way. So that was fine. Like I didn't have any fear about that. I was like, my mama know what I'm saying about her. Like she'll tell you. But my dad, on the other end, like I was saying, our relationship was like changing, And so like in the back of my mind, when I found out this was gonna be a book, I'm just immediately like, this finna all go down. Like everything's about to fall down. It's finna start back over. But I was also used to that pattern of things being good and then it not being good and then it be good and then I have to apologize and then rewind and rinse. So I think it was healing. I don't think healing is the right word. It was honest for me. But I think for him, like that honesty and what he perceives as like my truth and his truth being synonymous, like that was harder for him to like read. So yeah, we don't talk no more, but that's
Wow, that's
I was
shocking.
expecting. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. You know, one of the things I loved so much was your relationship with your father.
Oh, I never heard that comment. Tell me more.
It was complicated, but at least you guys were still like having phone calls and stuff. And,
Yeah.
you know, I think the hardest part about your book was it's like all of the, I don't want to say tragedies, but it's like the hardest parts about our experience as Black women. You know, it's like we're dealing with our dark skin, we're dealing with like the sexual exploitation thing, we're dealing with not knowing how to always engage and interact with white people that might be trying to help but are actually like making it awkward, you know. So it's all of that stuff kind of built up. And you know, one of the hurtful things for me that I write a lot about is that my dad has not really been present in my life, and it's been a big source of shame for me because I, you know, like you talk about, you know, we have these like continuous threads through Black experience sometimes that people always are writing about and are always kind of like groveling in, which are like the same kind of negative kind of stereotypes. But the fact that you guys were doing phone calls, at least I was thinking, oh, well, at least that's nice. At least he's present, you know, even if they're just talking about sports or, you know, whatever, at least they're communicating. So
yeah, it's nice because we're not talking about like what we need to talk about. It's a lot of, so like when it's actually time to talk about those things, not nice anymore. And like people have a hard time like facing themselves, which I'm getting, like I'm understanding that about myself. I'm speaking about me even though I'm talking. But yeah, I think like I knew that in my head. Like I already knew that when he read the book, like this was gonna happen. So I wasn't that shocked, but I was like very, very disappointed of like, dang, like here we go again. And like, we're going to have to try to fake rebuild something just to end up back here because we don't want to face the truth. And I'm not trying to do that. So, yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, you know, I think that's like a, you know, an unintended consequence sometimes of like sharing our truths is that we may hurt people. And, you know, I mean, it sounds like you were just pretty much like, I'm here to tell my story, you know, and I know a lot of people have to make that decision. Like, what do I tell, and what am I willing to risk to get my story out into the world?
Yeah, and I always made like a conscious note of like not writing about things that did not involve me. Like I'm involved in everything I write about. If you happen to be there, then maybe you shouldn't have been there if you don't want me to talk about it. Like, I don't know what to say. Maybe it's some quote, I forgot who said this, if you wanted people to write nicely about you, you should have behaved better. And I think about that all the time. Like, maybe you shouldn't have been there if you didn't want me to write about this. Or maybe you should have thought twice about what you were going to say in my presence because you know I'm going to write about it. If you're talking to me anyway.
Yeah, wow. Oh my gosh. So when you were producing this book, developing this book, putting it together, did you have like an intended audience in mind? Like who is this book written for?
I always have like little Black girls in mind, but even more than that, like dark-skinned Black girls in mind. Because I read a whole lot growing up. Like I read every genre of book ever, and it was very rare that like a dark-skinned Black girl was centered. Mm-hmm. Unless it was like Moesha or something. Or like even cartoons, like Black cartoons, it's usually like a lighter skinned mom, a lighter skinned daughter, and the father's dark skin. Like their stories are always told, but it's very rare to see dark skinned Black girls. And like I grew up with mostly all the little girls at my school look like me, and like we all have like similar stories that like nobody want to really listen to, because then they have to talk about how they're complicit in it. But yeah, that's always in my mind of little Black girls all the time. But also like the women in my family are also like my audience, like my mama, my granny, my aunties, because I feel like they have stories too. So if I can like help tell their stories through my work, I want to do that as well. Those
Yeah.
are like the main things.
Oh, nice. I mean, your book is so like Black female and empowering for so many different women to just kind of even just look at things differently. I've been in a similar experience where, I mean, the experience that you had with the workshop leader professor was like cringy, but you know, I've had that experience too, where like someone is maybe not intentionally, but they are using the N-word, and you don't know how to respond to that.
And you
so
had it more than once, huh?
yes, and you know, in the different contexts. And I like that your story didn't really come to like any kind of like conclusion of like how, you know, this should be dealt with in the future. You kind of left it really open, but people could relate and identify with it. But yeah, I've never talked about it with anyone either. So it was nice to read it, because like I can't even remember, like it just happened to me recently where I was just going into the gym and she was trying to tell me about the protests that were going on and these counter protests and what they were saying, and she let the word slip. Mm-hmm. And I feel bad because I'm someone that doesn't use the word at all. Mm-hmm. And I know you have your own you know, perspective on how the word can and should be used, but I'm like so sensitive about it. But, you know, it's like one of those things that we experience, but then there's never anyone really to talk to about it, or like you don't really want to bring it up, and it's awkward to rehash it because you don't really know whether it was meant, well, you know, it wasn't ill-willed, but still it was like uncomfortable. Yeah. So I appreciate you kind of covering a lot of these things. And I was also shocked at just how young you are.
Yeah. Thank you.
Your perspective is so wide, and it sounds like you're just so thoughtful about all of these experiences in your life that have really shaped you.
Yeah, I just been in grown folks' business my whole entire life. That's it. That's why, like, kids be playing, and I want to sit in the house and listen to what all the aunties are talking about and who did what. And like, girl, let me tell you what you need to do. Like, I was that kid. So that's probably, I always was interested of, I had this obsession when I was younger of like wanting to be taken seriously. Have anybody like felt that? Like, I'm very goofy and I'm very immature, but like also I have this idea of like, I knew early on, like in my work, I wanted to be taken seriously. And when I first started writing, a lot of people just kept saying, like, you're so funny. This is so funny. This essay is funny. You should write this. Funny, funny, funny. And I'm like, I'm trying to make people cry. And my teacher was like, what? So like that, I don't know why. Maybe it's like how I've been conditioned to think like, funny things can't be serious. I'm also relearning that like a lot of funny things are very, very serious. And I use humor a little bit in this book, but yeah, I just always been a thinker. I really, really value critical thinking. I always think that everything can be critiqued. Even my critiques can be critiqued. I don't want to be married to like my ideas to where like I'm stifled and I can't learn and grow, because I've seen people who don't want to like are married to their opinions and like they can't be changed. So I just didn't want to be like that. So I like try to incorporate that in my writing.
Yes. Speaking of like getting exposed to aspects of the world too soon, the trauma around seeing things like the Players Club as young girls. I had trauma around that too. So it was interesting to read someone else talk about it. Yes, my mom had a partner for a while, and he played the movie. You know, he had like a bootleg, I guess, of the movie. And I had friends from school over, and like one of my friends from school went to school the next day and like told everyone that she had watched this movie at my house. And of course the teachers got all concerned and they were like, what are you doing? And kids should be watching this. So it was interesting. And it's been something that I've carried. It's like an embarrassing moment. And so it's funny to hear about somebody else being exposed to it too young too. And the confusion around it.
Yeah. Of course, like the first time I saw it through my mama's fingers at the movie theater, whenever like strip scenes came on, I was like this, she like looking through, she thinking I'm not watching. And I just heard like a lot of laughter through the theater. I was like, okay, it's a funny movie. And then I got older, and by older, I mean like maybe 10 or like 8 or 9, and I'm watching it again. And I started laughing. Like the movie has funny moments for me. Bernie Mac, of course, is in it, funny. But the movie is very, very traumatizing and problematic. Probably because it's 99. Everything's problematic in 1999. But just seeing, like now I'm older and I do still watch the movie. Like if it's on TV, I'm gonna watch it. But like just seeing this sort of like overt sexual like Black woman like being admired on the stage was weird for me. It's something I've never seen. But also she was a lighter skinned Black woman being desired, and then we get like the darker skinned Black woman who's our cousin comes in doing the same job and literally gets treated horribly, assaulted, just a horrible experience. But we see her cousin like being revered to a certain extent. And that just kind of like triggered in my mind of like how sexuality and like being perceived as overly sexual benefits some women and hinders other women. And like I said, I do have like the trauma of that at 10. I still keep with me today because I'm like, I don't know how to like enter the space because I know what's expected of me and I know how I would be treated in this space. If y'all ain't seen everybody's seen the Players Club. If you haven't seen the Players Club, I don't know if
everyone's seen it. I think it's kind of like a cult classic.
Yeah.
If you're gonna watch it, just prepare yourself.
Yeah, and you also gotta think it's from like the gaze of a man. It's from the gay. Ice Cube directed it. He wrote it. It's like from the gay. Like women's sexuality is still written from his gaze. How he perceives Black women through like this colorist lens is from his gaze. So like even though it's not even about empowerment. I can't talk words. Empowerment. It's not even about that, especially during that time. It's more so of like, that's what you get for being a stripper, which is very different from like how we perceive it
now. Yeah. I know. And that was interesting too, because I had seen it and, there's the two different stories or the different paths that they walk down, but I didn't, they make it appear as though it's just like, oh, they're making such different decisions. One's trying to be good and go to school, and the other one's just doing all the bad stuff. But, they have that colorist undertone, again, that gets reinforced of like, these people are allowed to be sexual and they're still considered okay. And like, these other people are not really allowed to express their sexuality without being demeaned and,
It's like, we're going to protect her because she's like desirability all the way. That's a whole nother conversation. Desirability politics, like literally just ruins the world. But like you find her desirable, so she's revered and protected in a way that this other woman you don't find desirable would never be. And it shouldn't be a prerequisite to like treat women like women or like people. Yeah.
Right. And it's really nice the amount of like research that you go into in your book. Like when you start listing all of the, Black women who have received Oscars and the roles that they had to play to get there, it's like, wow, there really is like some kind of connection here. Like there's something inherently demeaning about how we have to portray ourselves in order to be celebrated again.
Yeah. And most of those films are directed by men. So yeah, Like, it's wild when you really think about it. Like, we celebrate them for winning. It's like, of course Halle Berry deserves an Oscar. Of course Viola Davis deserves an Oscar. But why did y'all pick this role when there's so many other roles? Why did Lupita have to be a slave to get the role? Like, even though performance amazing, it's not about them. Like, of course they deserve these awards, but it's just about like how the systems in place picks and chooses what would be celebrated, what deserves it. And then that also infiltrates like young kids' minds watching of this is what I have to do to get here. Or like I can't be in a sci-fi film and be taken seriously. I'm going to be an extra. I can't be in Star Wars and I don't know the characters of Star Wars. I've never seen it ever in my life. But I know like they not finna put somebody who looked like me as the star of the movie. They'll put John Boyega because he's great too, but like they will never. Is that Star Wars or Star Trek? See, I don't know. But yeah, it's just like weird. It's just weird. It's very weird when you actually like step back and look at like the timeline and the history of like who wins these awards, who gets to be in the spaces, who gets to write these things, who gets to direct them, which is why I think Michaela Cole is like so important and so necessary. Oh, yeah. Amazing. But yeah, I'm done ranting.
No, I mean, it's perfect too, because, you know, we see it so much kind of bleeding. Like, I mean, you go through this so much. You cover so many like really important topics. I almost feel like your book should be like necessary reading for like sixth grade girls, particularly sixth grade Black girls, because it covers so much from our complexion, our skin, you know, to our sexuality, to our, you know, our interactions with men and how, and the men in our lives and how we have to try to find a way to appease and also like protect ourselves against them. You know, it just, and I you know, I feel like in our modern day culture, we don't really have very many positive examples of Black femininity that are healthy.
Thank you for that. That was like a great compliment. Yeah, I wish like you said, who is my audience is also like myself. Like I wish I could have figured this stuff out early, even though I'm figuring it out earlier than expected. But yeah, you're right. Like they should have somebody they can look to like help explain things that parents maybe don't want to, or their cousins can't, or their uncles can't. So yeah.
Right. Or yeah, maybe they're just not, you know, attuned to, you know, in the way that you have had this really critical lens to dive deep into things. So you got your first book underneath your belt, which is awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you have like publications everywhere, but what is your writing practice like now?
So I'm like, I'm not really a writer. Like I write sometimes. I've been struggling to have a writing routine for like years. Like it's very, very hard for me to have a writing routine. I think that comes from like this idea that if I'm not productive to the point of exhaustion, that I'm not doing nothing. Like, so I have to write 1,000 words every day. Like I put those kind of crazy stipulations on myself. 1,000 words every day is very hard. So like I used to do things like that, and I do like 4 days straight. I burn out and don't write for a month because I did that crazy stuff. But I really struggle with finding a writing practice. I read every day. I think that's the writing for me, reading, listening to music, talking to people I know. And then I found myself lately writing very late at night. Like when everybody goes to sleep, I'll come in here and like try to rewrite. I wouldn't even say write. Like I'm looking at something I've already written and trying to shift it into something I haven't read before. So I spend a lot of time doing that. I wish I could say I have a routine, but I don't. Yeah, sometimes I write for like, it takes me a while to get into the flow of writing, and I think that's why I don't do it every day, because by the time I get into the flow, I'm so tired from all the stuff I had to do to get energy to do it. I done listened to 3 albums. I done read 50 pages of a book just to feel inspired to do it. And I'm realizing like at night when I don't have like late night, 3 a.m. when I don't have distractions. It's easier for me that I can write 1,000 words in an hour versus me taking 8 hours to prepare to write this. Yeah. So that's working for me right now, but it'll probably change.
I like that. I think people get a little too crazy sometimes with trying to provoke the muse and, just like force themselves into writing. Because it's like with your writing, what's beautiful about it is that it's so reflective. And so I feel like you kind of need to be in the world. You need to be like taking in content. So you're going to have some stuff to reflect on.
Yeah.
In front of the computer all day, you wouldn't have that depth to offer. But what advice might you have for young women that are aspiring writers and they want to share their story and they're inspired by you?
Mm-hmm. I would say this is like cliche, but it's cliche for a reason because it works. Like just start writing. Literally start writing. I would say this is on my vision board for this year because I don't take my own advice. Is stop trying to do things perfectly and just do them. So stop trying to have like the end goal of what you're writing immediately. It takes time. It takes practice. That's a word that I think we could use more in the literary world. Like we have to practice this because it's not just gonna get good. And practicing can be 3 years to get like half a book done. But that practicing, it'll make it reveal, your book will reveal itself to you the more that you do it. So I would say just start. Don't try to make it perfect. Don't try to make the sentences perfect. And I would also say write in your voice. Like voice is so important. A lot of stuff that we read sounds alike because people are scared to write in their voices, their natural voices. So don't be afraid. My grammar's messed up. I'm gonna write like how I talk. Big words don't make your book good. I would say that. Also, long books don't make your book good. Your book is like 150 pages. I would rather read that than a 450-page book. I'm sorry. It could be the greatest book, but when I get to 200 pages, I'm going to be tired and I don't want to read it.
It's going to be a riveting story if it's going to be that long.
Yeah, like what is the point of this? What were you doing to write this much like at once? But yeah, that would be my advice.
Oh, nice. Well, I know they have some other questions for you, so I don't want to take up all the time this evening, but I'm so glad I got a chance to speak to you, and I'm so proud of you as a published author now, and I hope I get to see more of your work. And I'm just curious, before we go, are you working on anything new now? Any other long-form writing projects?
Yeah, thank you so much for all your kind words that you just said. Really appreciate it. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being here and asking great questions. Yeah, I just finished, I don't want to say finished, but I turned in my poetry book. So it's done, but like, of course, I'm going to go back and redo things because it can always be better. But I'm working on what I should be working on when I say I need a writing practice is a childhood memoir that I'm working on. That's like centered around Dallas, particularly Oak Cliffs, and like growing up with my friends and doing hood rat things with my friends, and not getting caught, and revealing how I learned about desire through like growing up, and also how I learned about desire through looking at the women in my family and their relationships with men, and how like I learned that very early, and like how I replicated it. And then also how I found how desirability as a politic, but also desire as like a need and a want internally, how they meet and coexist. So yeah, I'm working on that.
Oh, it's so funny. As soon as you said like doing hood rat things with my friends, Megan Thee Stallion popped into my head.
Yeah.
I probably see you guys like being BFFs, like in Texas.
I want to be her friend. Like I'm telling you, she needs me around. Like we would be two peas in a pod. She makes my favorite genre of music because she don't be keeping her foot off these men's neck. I love it. Yes, if you got her number,
I wish. You know what? I'm going to try to get a hold of her and make the recommendation. Yeah. My only advice to you would be just like stay away from the parties because they get dangerous.
That's why she needs to be my friend, because I'm gonna say you should not hang with all these people you do not know.
Oh, thank you, Blake.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. Thank you, Kendra. Love the conversation. Before we take audience questions, Kendra, I think it'd be fun for you to read a selection of your work. Elaine has suggested the last 4 paragraphs at the end of page 135, which I believe is from The Cheapest Casket. So that basically page 135, and then we'll get some of the questions that were submitted ahead of time, and then some that have come in on the chat.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Elaine, for the page number. Okay, so I'm going to read from The Cheapest Casket, and this essay is towards the end, but the essay is about like me imagining my mom's death, because I think about death a lot. And I think about, like, if one death would like break me, it would be my mama dying. So I would want to die before her. So this is about like how we plan out like our funeral arrangements and things like that. And I had got sick. This is when my first year in Chicago, I had got sick, and like the doctors couldn't tell me what was wrong, and still don't know what's wrong to today. But like I was out of it for like 2 weeks, like bent over. Something was wrong with my stomach. All right. That's all you need to know, I think. I do not tell her I would die for her without anyone asking me to. I do not say anything on our bus ride back as I lay my head in her lap to cry from the pain she just added to my insides. When we exchanged funeral preparations, it was fun. We sat in my room, and I looked up at her from the floor as she sat on my bed the night before her flight home. It was fun because of the major differences we had in the expectations of the people we will leave behind, mostly one another. I still have to think about if I would actually wrap her in a sheet when she goes. That's something my mama wants since I was little. Like she said, when she died, she wanted me to wrap her up in a sheet like baby Jesus or something. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. But okay. Yeah. It seems to be a constant whenever we talk about it. She wants to wear a sheet. I want to wear what I would wear to sleep, a t-shirt and baggy bottoms, since I could basically be taking a forever nap. She wants a eulogy preached by a pastor who shares her same values. I want everyone there to say something about me, preferably something true. She wants heaven, and I want Jesus walks. We began to trade ideals. Do not spend a lot of money on no casket. Buy the cheapest one they got and bury me in the veteran cemetery. It's free. She always says there's no need to spend that much money on dead people. The body isn't something that needs to be preserved. So a wooden box, I say. I guess whichever one is cheapest, she reiterates, and don't let certain people come. For a long time, I did not know I was supposed to fear death. In movies, that is the number one thing the characters try to avoid. They jump over buildings, slide under cars, anything to avoid the hit. Death in the Bible romanticizes its essence in a way it almost seems revolutionary. In life, death is the one thing we cannot run away from. My old pastor said life after death is better than life on earth, and I don't know how he know that when he ain't died yet. I have concerns. Will I know the same people in heaven as I do on earth? Will I even go to heaven? Will my heavenly family be the same as my earthly one? I have faith. Mama, I don't think I'm good enough to be able to meet you in heaven. I have too many secrets I have kept from you. Do you love the Lord? She always asks me. Yes. Well, you'll be in heaven. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendra. So we have a few questions that have come in, and Tamara, just a little bit up in the chat, she asks, how do you think the lack of representation of Black figures in stories, whether in books or in film, plays into what you write? How does it shape the way you see your subject matter? Do you ever hold back because of the fear that others won't relate?
No, I never hold back in fear of people who won't relate. But I'm also just like kind of rude like that. So like that's a natural thing. But I think for me, when I think about like representation, I try to write from like an intersectional point of view. Because I don't think the problem is like the representation. Sometimes I think the lack of like a complete full representation is what we're missing. So like we see Black women, but we don't see them like reality shows, for instance. Like we see the Kardashians just like living a great life. Like that's the reality. But like with Black women on reality TV, it's always something horrible happening. Somebody's fighting, somebody's getting hit, somebody's doing this. And I'm like, where's the intersection of like femininity? Where's the intersection of gender? What's the intersection of race? What's the like, how do these things work intersectionally, and how can I portray that in my writing? So I think like I'm very interested in showing a complete picture of somebody versus just having a face there. Yeah.
All right. Stacey, do you want to ask your question, Stacey? Do you want to unmute, or would you like me to ask it?
I can ask it.
Okay, I pasted it into the chat.
Oh, thank you. Hi. First, I want to say, I said this in the chat last week, Kendra, but I love your book and it moved me, and I've already reread many, many passages. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And you were talking earlier, or we've been talking a little bit about how you didn't see yourself in a lot of books when you were growing up. And as a person of color, I remember the first time that I recognized myself in a story. And so I'm always curious about how other people of color first, recognize themselves in literature. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, or sometimes it's both. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of wondering what that moment was like for you. And then sort of a second question that could be related or not, is what kinds of books and stories do you want to see more of being published?
Thank you for those questions. I think for me, the first time I saw a semblance of myself in a book was in Sister Soldier's The Coldest Winter Ever, which is a 400-page book. So I just like shamed that, and I read that book like 10 times. But I think in that book, that was the first time I not only saw like semblance of myself in a character, but I saw like my friends in it as well. Like I actually knew the people. I knew how their life would probably turn out because like it reminded me of somebody that I actually know. So that was the first time I saw myself in a book. I think for me, but also like the first time I saw semblance of myself was in the movie Eve's Bayou, which is like my favorite movie. Not necessarily like in the physical, but like just like seeing Black kids imagine a world that they could create their own destiny. So it was like this like Afro-futuristic take on survival that I saw that for the first time. And like little kids making their own decision regardless of what the adults around them thought best. They knew what they wanted. They had agency. So I think that was the first time for that. Second question, can you repeat it one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm wondering, and it could be related, but it doesn't have to be, what kinds of books and stories you would like, that you want to see more in the publishing world?
Yeah, I want to see more Black people in the sci-fi arena. I don't write that at all, but like I have friends who are like directors who like make this kind of art, and it's just overlooked, but it's amazing. Like it's amazing. Divergent and Hunger Games like can't compare to what like some of these writers are doing, but they don't get the chance to because it's too niche, or like they don't know how to market a Black writer, genre writer. You have to be writing about pain and struggling to be to like have people witness your art. So I would love to see like more people of color in general in like those arenas of like genre writing, because you know we just tired of seeing like white teenagers like get blue, like the world blows up and they in the apocalypse, and I'm like, how will we exist in this? Like, because this is not what's going to happen to us if this happens. So I would love to see that more, and I also would like challenge myself to like be more imaginative in my work, like in creative nonfiction. I would like to see myself do that as well, like imagine different worlds and like create more worlds inside of a real world. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Kendra, I just posted a question in the chat from Alexandra, who just asked, what is the title of your poetry book? And is there any difference in your writing process when writing poems versus long form prose?
Yeah. So the book is called The Collection Plate, which is just like a take on my upbringing in church, and how everybody's asking something from me all the time in the church, whether that's money or like your sanity or like your body or like anything. So it's called The Collection Plate. And I think writing poetry for me, it's way less pressure. Like I love writing poetry. I'm figuring that out. I feel like I was supposed to be a poet before I like found nonfiction anyway. And I think like me allowing myself to like explore that side of me, it just feels like less weight. Like I don't feel heavy. I don't have to explain everything the way I would in like a nonfiction genre. Some things you just gonna have to figure out on your own. I think the process for me is way easier because I have a phone with poetry, and I can experiment with like structure and things like that in my phone, where I don't have to like actually sit at a computer and look at big blocks of text for like hundreds of pages and like try to sift through that. Whereas poetry, I'm able to literally write it anywhere. Yeah. And I feel like it's the most underrated genre ever because it's not an easy thing to do. It's like so hard. You saw like a actually great poet like Terrence Hayes or something, and you like, how do you do this? It's like such a skill. So I'm trying to like learn the skill. I think it's easy for me now because like I'm just doing whatever I want to do, which I enjoy that too. But I also want to learn about the craft of it more and like actually because I respect the art, so I like want to learn more about it. But yeah.
So thanks, Kendra. I don't think my thing works.
I hear you.
Yeah, you're very faint.
Terrified my mic hasn't come back on. No, I just wanted to say, just as a working poet, thank you so much. I loved how you talked about that, and I can't wait to read your book. I absolutely love that title, and we actually had Terrence Hayes about 1.5 years ago, Gemini Inc. in San Antonio, and can I just say, as an executive director of a literary arts nonprofit, it's one of the highlights. He was just amazing.
Yeah.
And he made the writing process seem so accessible, and we had the room packed with like 80 teenagers from inner city schools, and they just had their socks blown off. He just didn't come off like a poet, which is such an unfair thing because there's so many different kinds of poets. And so just thank you so much for just giving a shout out for poetry. And I loved how you talked about, I don't write poems on a phone, so I'm going to try it now.
Yeah, use that notes app.
But very impressed that you can, pivot between prose and poetry. So do you find like writing your poetry, does it feed your prose at all and vice versa? Or are they just like two separate like writing worlds for you?
Yeah, I'm quickly realizing like I can't write prose without poetry. Like I would read poetry, like when I say I read every day, like I'm reading a poetry book. But yeah, I need poetry to inform my prose because it has a lot to do. I'm a rhythmic person. I love music and I want my writing to feel a rhythm to it, and poetry definitely helps me like incorporate that.
You should read Michelle Whitaker. I'm just going to shamelessly suggest a friend of mine. She's a wonderful poet. She's a New York City poet, and it's Whitaker, like Whittaker. But I just check her out. You might really like her.
Thank you. I wrote it down.
There's something that came up last time, when you were talking with Mark too, just about, one of the things I just love, somebody in the chat said, you're just raw, you're real, you just speak the truth on the page, which I love. And I remember, I'm always trying to learn this lesson, not to censor myself on the page, because people will just read themselves into your work, whether or not you want them to. And because we're talking about your, the collection plate, and then also the childhood memoir that you're writing, something stood out from last time when you were talking to Mark. I think if I remember it correctly, you said that like if you could rewrite some of the sections in here, you'd go a little bit harder. Is that true?
Yeah.
Right. So my question is, and I just loved reading your book. And so how, now that you've had one book come out and you're kind of, rereading it and kind of thinking how you would edit it, how is that the idea that you're just going to kind of not censor yourself? Has that unburdened you, or do you feel burdened by the fact that you're going to try and go a little bit harder with, say, your memoir?
That's a great question. Like, it unburdens me to the extent where like it frees me to actually push a draft out. I think like when I'm trying to suppress what I really want to say, or I'm trying to be like too fake deep, or I'm trying to be too whimsical, and like just say it. Like just say it. So when I just say it, then I'm allowed to be whimsical. Then I'm allowed to be fantastical. Then I'm allowed to be metaphorical. But if I don't just say it the way I want to, I was trying to start singing a song that nobody knew. The song says, I just want to say what I want to say. But then like the next part of that song says, but will you hear what I say if I ever say it? So I think that fits. So I think about like, if I don't go as hard as I want to go, this story is not my story. Like, it's not real. It's no longer real if I'm not saying, it's fiction. It turns into fiction if I'm like just beating behind the bush. Is it beating behind the bush? That phrase? That's it. Well, y'all know what I mean. But yeah, beating around the bush. Yeah. So if I'm not just like forcing myself to do that, then I can't be explorative when it comes to style on the page. I can't be explorative when it comes to structure. I think like that truth allows me to take risks, even more risks. Like, that's the easy part, is telling it, but it's like what comes afterwards, and like how do I want to construct it and conform it and structure it into a book form.
I love that answer. That's so inspiring. I mean, just the courage to write, I think that's what any writer, whether or not you've been published or not, that's kind of the what's sitting on your shoulder the whole time. And it's nice to kick that person or that thought out of the room. Alyssa wants to know, do you have a website that you might recommend books to read? Is that right, Alyssa? Do you have I don't know if you wanted to unmute yourself, but I don't know if that's your personal website. I know people want to. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I did want to find out if she has, or if you do have a personal website, Kendra, possibly, or.
No, I don't. I had one, and then I was like, I don't use it. I mean, even though I know it's not for me to use, I just like, I have the domain. The website's not up. But on Twitter, I do have like a running thread of books that I'm currently reading that I add to whenever I'm finished with the book. I take pictures of it, and I put my Twitter handle in the chat, and I post the book and page that I love the most. But if you just want like book recommendations, you can email me anytime. Same email, gmail.com though.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that in the chat. What is the Gmail address?
I'm putting it in right now.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Well, okay. Are there any other questions for Kendra? Is there anything else? If you want to unmute yourself or put it in the chat.
Kendra, I put this in the chat. You were talking about African Americans who write sci-fi, and my friend Ron just published, or is about to publish, one of the most incredible sci-fi novels I've ever read. So you've got to check it out. It's called Silverfish. It's in the chat.
Okay.
It's by a small press called Clash Books, I think. Mm-hmm. it'll knock your socks off. It's insanely good.
Thank you for that. I'm gonna buy it now. That's also another thing I want to say. Like, start reading independent presses. Like,
Yeah, totally.
it's so much good stuff. Like the best stuff, really. Thank you for that.
Yeah. I mean, I hope you like it. It's I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I got it like right here on the screen.
All right. Read it and let me know. I'd love to hear what you think about it.
Okay.
And everyone else, you should buy it. It's a really great book. It's really fascinating. I mean, I'm sorry to plug him while we're talking to you, but I feel like now's the time. It's an incredible take on the stock market in the future. And that's all I'm going to say. It's about capitalism. And it's it's so good. So, okay. There. Bye.
Thank you.
Well, Kendra, thank you so much for being with us for the Big Texas Read 2 weeks ago and tonight. It's been so much fun to kind of listen to you talk about your work, and I've so enjoyed it. So enjoyed living with your book for the last couple weeks and even before that. And Danielle, thank you so much for moderating tonight. Thank you for your great questions and for leading us in this discussion tonight. But just thank you both. And Kendra, I cannot wait to read the collection plate and then your forthcoming memoir as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody who took time to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you for reading, for conversing. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you, David. Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Blake.
We loved having you.
No, it was great hearing you talk. It was really great, Kendra. Yeah.
Come back.
I will.
Yeah. We're going to keep this Big Texas Read going, even maybe when we get out of the pandemic. We might have to go back and forth between San Antonio and Dallas, but we're going to put the collection plate on deck whenever it's up. So that'll be so great. Well, thank you everybody for being here tonight, for joining in, and go follow Kendra on Twitter. It's great.
I'll be on there. Bye.
All right, everybody.
Thank you so much, Kendra.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Your
much.
work's amazing. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Danielle.
Thanks, guys.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle. That was great.
Oh, thanks, Blake. I felt like I was a little bit nervous, but
no, you were great.
So great speaking with her.
No,
I thought you were amazing. I thought it was really interesting and just seemed to flow. Yeah.
Oh, no, yeah.
Yeah.
I wish I had your kind of cadence or composure, because when I'm nervous, I talk really fast. And I thought it was just like a really measured, like really thoughtful, engaging conversation. It didn't seem like you were nervous at all. So
Right. I mean, I wish I could like talk to her all the time. She's so cool.
Yeah, no, she has such great, rich answers, and there's just some really, I mean, this is going to sound silly, thought-provoking thinking, but there's just so much rich thought going